Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Raising your game by automating processes is easier than it sounds. I'm Niamh Lordan, Digital Marketing Manager at FlowForma, and FlowForma are the host of today's webinar. With me I have Forrester's Vice President and Principal Analyst, John R. Reimer, and Robbie Malloy, Product Manager at Aon Insurance. Before we get started, I would like to take care of some housekeeping and offer a few tips for viewing today's webinar. Please note this webinar is being recorded. If you have trouble logging into audio or any other issues during the webinar, please email info@flowforma.com for assistance. Throughout the webinar, your lines will be muted, but you can use the Q&A function on your right-hand side to ask any questions. We will answer all questions at the end. After the webinar, we will send a copy of the recording to everyone, and we would appreciate it if you could complete our short feedback form at the end. Now we want to introduce our speakers for today. John Reimer, Vice President and Principal Analyst of Forrester, serving application development and delivery professionals. John is one of the most respected advisors in the IT industry. John leads Forrester's application development and delivery coverage of cloud platforms, as well as low-code development platforms. We're also joined by Robbie Malloy, Product Manager at Aon. Robbie holds the position of Product Manager at Aon Insurance. In his role, he manages all in-house applications. Working at Aon for over 4 years, his main areas of responsibilities are SQL, SharePoint, and FlowForma process automation. So John and Robbie, we're delighted to have you both with us today. Would you like to get started?
Yes, delighted to be with you today, Niamh. And let's jump right in. I want to set the stage a bit for the experiences that Robbie's going to share with all of us. So by sharing the findings that we've been seeing in our research with clients. So the focus here is on process automation and digital customer experience. Digital customer experience has been getting a lot of investment since 2009-10, coming out of the recession, as companies and governments and all kinds of organizations really try to apply technology to make their customer experiences with them much more productive and immediate and smart and just much more pleasurable. That understandably has led to a focus on what I think of as the front end, the mobile app, the web app, maybe the omni-channel and multi-channel approach. Basically putting tools in front of the customer that allows them to interact with the organization for whatever purpose they have, whether it's shopping or buying something or doing work, as we'll see with Robbie's example or what have you. Here's the problem. Behind those front ends are loads and loads of operational processes, sometimes hundreds or thousands, depending on the situation. And if you flip the slide, Niamh, the problem here is that while we focused on the front end, and we've got some really amazing examples out there, we haven't focused as much on the operational processes that support those customer experiences. And so when we hit a bump, when we hit an unexpected condition or some other issue that has to be resolved by people scurrying around in the background, the customer experience falls apart, literally falls apart. And you find this in retail, with warranties and returns. You find it in all kinds of retail services organizations with scheduling and parts and so forth. This unfortunately routinely happens. So we're seeing a big focus among our clients on process automation. And it's not the big BPM processes of the past. It's these hundreds and thousands of small processes that affect the customer's experience or the ability to do business. So here's some good news. We did a survey of process professionals early last year, should say, and we asked them what their priorities are for their process improvement efforts, and obviously they're reflecting their company's priorities as well. And you can see that accelerate digital business transformation rises to the top. Now we were asking them, what's your priority now and where's it going in 2 years? This is not time series data. Where did you come from 2 years ago? Where are you now? Where are you going in 2 years? So good news, people at one time focused on cost reduction. Now they've shifted over to digital, their digital presence. Here's the problem. We took this same survey 2 years earlier, so in 2016, exact same results came back. So the focus is there. I think we understand as a community that we need to focus more on automating these operational processes, but we're not quite getting there. We're not quite, progressing fast enough. So what do we got to do? What do we have to do here to make progress? Next slide. The first thing we have to recognize is that our central IT and central application development teams cannot provide the software we need to automate these operational processes. They consistently find that the central IT groups, including application development teams, are tied down keeping the core business applications alive. Maybe they own the .com or the digital applications, but not always. But maybe. But still, there just isn't enough. They just don't have enough capacity to take on dozens or maybe even hundreds of more projects every year. It's just not there. So we're going to have to tackle this automation challenge using other people, other approaches. And we think it's real simple. Either the business people who know those processes and know the data that's required deliver those applications themselves, or they get help from a person who is embedded in their business unit, not reporting into some central function, but who is embedded with them and delivers the automation, the process automation that they need. It is a real change in the way that software is delivered, but we just don't see any other way to tackle this challenge. Now, if we're going to change the work, and we're going to enlist more people, including business people, to deliver software, we're not going to be able to give them programming languages to do that work. They're not programmers. They're not professional developers. They're going to need a different set of tools. We are going to need a different set of tools to really make this fly. So, next slide. This is where what we call low code comes into play. And by the way, if you don't like the term low code, you can blame me, because that was the term I coined and it just has caught on. Here's results from a large survey that we do every year of professional developers, and you can see a lot of them are already using low-code products to do their work, and you can see that the focus, a big focus of the use of low-code is in fact in business process and workflow application, process automation. Low-code has been very, very successful as a foundation to tackle the automation of these operational processes. These are findings from the work of professional developers. There's lots and lots of business people in addition to this group, the group that we're representing here, that are also using low-code to deliver process automation of various descriptions. So we've got, if we can recognize that we need to actually approach this software differently, we can recognize that we need a different set of tools and foundation for this work. We think we've got a fighting chance, to begin to tackle this, begin to break the logjam and really tackle these very critical applications. Last slide is a hopeful note. Next slide. We did in the survey that we did of developers that I mentioned, and we asked them if they're using low code, and we asked them a bunch of other questions about where they were focused. What were they really focused on in their development efforts? And you can see, and this is very helpful to me because you can see the low code, the developers using low code are much more focused on the the customer experience, growing revenue, driving innovation, improving customer experience. So it's very helpful to me because we are seeing companies begin to recognize that low code and this different way of organizing, a more decentralized way of organizing, can actually achieve results. So hopefully that has set the stage. Let's flip the slide and I'll say thank you. This is work that a number of us are engaged in here at Forrester. Happy to engage with you afterwards if we can help. And let's switch over. Let's flip the slide and switch over to Robbie, who I think has a very instructional experience to relate to us. That strikes right at the heart of this issue for a very large company that I'm sure you've all heard of called Aon. So welcome, Robbie.
Thanks, John. That was great insights that you shared with us. I suppose we know that our audience love hearing customer stories, and that's why it was important for us to invite Aon here today. And Robbie has a really interesting story to share about how Aon are really raising the game by automating their processes. And John, I know you have lots of interesting questions that you're going to pose to Robbie. So right now, I'll just hand the floor back to you guys.
Thanks so much, Neve. Robbie, welcome. Great to have you with us, and thanks so much for sharing.
Hey, John. Thanks to be here. Thanks to Neve as well. It's great to be here to talk to you guys.
Great. So let's just start with the first question, Robbie. It'd be helpful to just understand a little about Aon and your role at Aon.
Sure, yeah. Well, you know, that we're pretty well. I think Aon is certainly one of the largest insurance companies in the world. I think it's about 120 countries with around 500 offices. It's somewhere in the range of 50,000 employees, I believe. In Ireland, there's about 700 employees across 5 different sites, and I'm the product manager for all those sites. Mainly, I would support all the in-house applications from, say, SharePoint, SQL, and FlowForma. Basically, anything application related would go through me. And I've been in the Aon now for just over 4 years. The last 2 of which I've been the product manager. Previous to that, I was desktop support for the Dublin office. But I moved into an application role about 2 years ago.
Right, and you've got some background in technology.
Yes, yeah, I did. I have a computer systems degree, and then I've been in desktop support for the past about 10 years or so. Yeah,
great. So let's flip the slide and go and get into your experience. So you tackled some process automation problems at Aon, actually quite a number, as we'll see. Tell us about the pain points for Aon. You know, it sounds like you were working very closely with the business, and you were very much aware of some pain points that were disrupting or were impeding successful business outcomes. Tell us a little bit about those.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I suppose that some of the main issues that we had was that across all areas of the business, there was a lot of processes that we had in place, but there wasn't any standard process that we used to keep track of information, keep track of insurers, of brokers, and we needed a standard process, a uniform process to actually keep all this information recorded and have it easily available. One of the big issues that we had was, many different people would have different ways of recording this information, be it Excel spreadsheets, be it just paper-based information, which obviously is in this day and age is a worry. So I think certainly one of the main areas was just have a centralized location for all of this information that we would need to keep track of. Obviously, as well, as being an insurance company, there's a lot of compliance and audit potential risks if we don't have this information available. Any losing some of this sort of, like, for example, like contractor information can be a big issue. So to have the assurances that all of this information is readily available to anyone who needs it, it certainly brings a great deal of relief for the brokers. which so that certainly would be one of the main points.
So it's even a large and sophisticated company like Aon has many of these processes. There were probably, we've seen hundreds or thousands. Is that the magnitude that we're looking at here? That you were looking at here?
Yeah, look, I suppose we would focus more on just some of the local processes. So there certainly would be, I'm sure, in the range of hundreds of thousands of these processes company-wide. From an Aon point of view, I'd say it's more there was just a few key processes that we needed to really lock down to have a real kind of proper system in place to manage these processes. Right.
Great. Let's go to the next question. So you mentioned that you work with SQL Server, you work with SharePoint. Tell us about how you came to use FlowForma and how it fits into your portfolio to tackle these processes.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, we would be pretty we would use SharePoint fairly heavily. We would have a lot of various different sites that use SharePoint. So when we were looking for a process automation tool, FlowForma was certainly one of the main ones that came up. And when we met them, we were given a demo and we were shown how well it worked and how easy it was to build these flows. Like one of the key features of this is that it's incredibly easy to build a flow, a process within the SharePoint environment that we had. It didn't require us to go off and buy a huge amount of infrastructure or anything like that. We could pretty much slot this into the systems that we had, but it gave us a much greater control over. SharePoint isn't the best we find when trying to do workflows and stuff like that. So just having the customization options in FlowForma was great. The various different flows that we had in mind from a pretty early point in looking into the different options that we could get. The FlowForma pretty much checked all the boxes that we were looking for.
And you're saying no coding. You've been able to achieve the goals without coding any at all.
Yeah, because it's built into SharePoint. There wouldn't. I haven't done any code. I've built 20, 30 plus sites flows at this stage, and there's been no coding whatsoever. It's very easy to design the flows now, and there's the design manager within FlowForma now, which makes it extremely easy to make it look well as well. So yeah, it's very, very easy to make these flows work.
Right. One of the things I wanted to ask you was you come from you have a comp sci background and you come from a technical background. Some people look at tools like FlowForma where you don't have to code, and they say, oh, it's just for toys. It's not for real serious applications. For that, you really need programming languages. You agree with? I assume you disagree with that.
Yeah, I definitely would disagree with that. Yeah, just because we actually have in the office in Dublin, there's one of my colleagues who isn't from an IT background. He's a project manager, and he would have no real IT background, and he would have built one of the more advanced forms that we use. So he was able to build that up from scratch without any IT background, and it does a very good job for what he needs it for.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely wouldn't. You would not, because obviously people, as you say, people look at a coding system and they can get turned away, but it's so easy to use and so intuitive that you definitely don't need an IT background for this.
And these are serious applications. These are not just toys.
Absolutely.
You're actually running real business processes. And
yes, we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Let's flip the slide and talk about some of the details. Let's look at some of the processes you've automated using FlowForma. Robbie, tell us about those.
So yeah, one of the first main ones that we brought in was our onboarding and offboarding system. So that's HR for all new hires and leavers. It's very important for us to keep track of that, especially given there'd be a lot of confidential information and we have to make sure that when somebody leaves, the relevant people are notified so that their application access gets removed or their folder access gets removed. And FlowForma gives us a very easy way to notify the correct people, have a proper process flow there, so that if anything requires approval, like if there's a specific application that requires approval, that person will get notified. And then, you know, this is the main thing for this was an audit point of view. We needed to be able to say, if auditors came on site and they wanted to say, you know, so and so left on the 1st of March, we need to see that this request was logged and show that their access was removed as scheduled. So, you know, FlowForma allowed us to do that, which was great.
Right.
In the last year or so, obviously GDPR has been a major issue in the EU. So, you know, we've built a flow which any GDPR requests that come into the company get logged through the FlowForma site that we have. So there's various different types of requests that we get. So they'll be logged into the GDPR site, and that will notify the GDPR team, the business team, whoever it is that needs to get this information. They'll have, you know, they have a central platform to go in and look at these requests so that they can get all the information they need. So we also have the insurance, the fact find, and the insurer amendment. The insurer amendment is we just have a list of insurers, and if we need to amend these insurers or approve the insurers or create new insurers, we can request this through the site, and again, it notifies the relevant people in the various different business units.
Right.
They can approve these, approve or reject these requests. And if they're approved, then we'll actually implement them into our main applications. Right. And then the other main part of the FlowForma sites that we use is the subcontractor process. We call it's the insurer vetting system. Basically, we use this for clients. We give them we offer them a way of keeping track of, for example, all the contractors that will be on site. So any builders, any people doing actual work on site, just the client needs to know that they're insured, that they have the relevant insurance to be doing the work that they're supposed to be doing. And if they don't have that insurance and they're on site, it can be a massive issue. Like if something happened and somebody got hurt and they didn't have the relevant insurance, you know, that would open up a big liability for the company. So we needed a place for that.
Yeah, let's drill into that one a little bit more. I think a lot of people may not. I know I was surprised to learn about this process, and I think a lot of people maybe don't realize that when you're you see, particularly in Dublin. I've been to Dublin recently, and there are construction cranes everywhere, and the city's booming. Those sites, different contractors show up to those sites to do work every day on different schedules. And to your point, if they're not insured, or if we can't verify that they're insured, then they actually can't work, and the work stops, or the work gets delayed. You were describing this a little more detail. I think it's really a critical process for Aon, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
They can't progress.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, our clients, they couldn't risk having someone on site who doesn't have the correct insurance. You know, because as I was saying, if something happened, they're not covered under this insurance, and it would be a massive issue. So to give the client that peace of mind to know that they can, like, if they're unsure, so if somebody turns up their site and they're not 100% sure if they have the correct insurance, they can log onto the portal, go, there's the client, he's got the insurance, okay, you're good to go. Or on the opposite side, if he doesn't have the correct insurance, he gets sent away, because it just opens up too much risk to have somebody on site who doesn't have the correct insurance. Right.
And without this flow, previously people would just get on the phone and try to hunt down someone who knew what the situation was, right? It was
exactly. Yeah, you'd be ringing up and you'd just be hoping that the person that actually has the information is available. You'd be hoping they know exactly, because some of the people who deal with this stuff would go through, they'd have a lot of different contractors on their books. So it's, to even find the information can be difficult especially if you're going through paper-based notes. You could be looking for this information it could take you a day to find this information, and that's a day where potentially the work has to stop because the critical employee isn't on site.
So replacing that, there's now a portal and a process and processes behind that portal that allow the clients, that allow the site managers to get the information, determine what the status is right away.
Exactly. Yeah. Usually, in the clients themselves, there'll be a few people who will have access to the sites, and if there's any questions from the actual, like say the building site has any questions, they just get in touch with one of these people, and they have immediate access to the information that they require, and it's very easy to find it. It's the views that we have in FlowForma are designed specifically for the client, so that they know that they don't have to go searching through various different lists and sites. They click on one button and they have the information they need.
Excellent. How long did it take you to build that process, to automate that process?
The first one we did probably took more time than any of them. I'd say it was a couple of days work of actually just, and the main kind of part of the work I've found with building the sites, it's not even so much like to actually build it. I've built some of these sites in less than a day now. Usually what takes the most amount of time is actually figuring out what exactly it is they're looking for. So, because they'll say, oh, we want to automate a process, but there's obviously a lot. You've got to drill down into that quite a bit to know who needs to be notified, emails, all sorts of different steps. So it's when they know what they want, it's a lot easier for us to build a site. So any of the newer sites that I would have built, certainly, like I built one last week. It took me less than a day, and it was fully functional and ready to go for the client.
Wow. So this is the point I was on earlier about needing companies having hundreds or even thousands of these processes. If you can automate one of those processes in under a day, you've got a fighting chance, don't you, of getting this automation done. If if it's your typical 6-month or a year project, then you don't have a prayer.
No, not at all. Yeah, like there have been instances where I've gotten a request and it's like, look, we need to site up and running ASAP, and I'll lock myself away in a room and go at it for a day, and then next day it's pretty much ready to go. Like with a lot of things, there'll be a few little bits and pieces that you'll change after, but the core functionality is there and good to go.
Sure. I'm curious too, you mentioned that sometimes people say, well, we need to automate this process, and then you go into a requirements discussion and really figure out exactly what they need and exactly how it works and so forth. Do you find that being able to work so quickly helps you with the dialogue? What helps you be able to show the customer, show them a prototype or a basic representation of the app, and get through that requirements discussion more quickly? Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like as you say, like being able to build a site and even if it's not 100% functional, it'll show them exactly how the flow would work. You can give it to them a day or two later when it's fresh in their minds. They're not having to go back to notes to try and remember what was discussed. It's it's built up, it's ready to go. They can run through it, do some testing themselves. They'll usually come back with a few, want to change a few questions here, add in, and even a lot of time they'll come back and go, oh, I hadn't even thought about adding this question, so we'll stick that in. But to be able to build these as quickly, as I said, it keeps it very fresh in the mind, and it allows them to actually focus on exactly what it is they're looking for, rather than just a vague idea. Right.
That's great. I've heard that consistently. That's great. Let's go to the next question. Oh, actually, we've got some screenshots, don't we, Robbie?
Yeah, these are just a couple of screenshots from one of the contractor sites that we have. So I've blacked out the actual client information just for security purposes. But yeah, so basically there's just 3 screenshots that we've got here. So this is just this is a client that we have who deals with a lot of construction. So there'd be a lot of people on site, doing various tasks. And they wanted to be able to see compliant contractors, non-compliant contractors, active policies, expired policies on sites. So they are the 4 forms, the four views that we built for them. So as you can see on this slide here, this is compliant contractors. So these are people who are fully cleared to work on a site. We've got the comment there with various different comments from the brokers. But basically, the way it is for the guys, for the client, is that if they go to the site, they see the green, they see compliant, then that person is good to work, and they don't need to ask any other questions.
So if there was a non-compliant contractor in this view, it would be a red row.
Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide there.
Yeah.
So sorry, so this is actually this is expired policies rather than compliant the contractor. So this is a slightly different view. So this one doesn't have the red, but as you say, there's the two different colors. There's the red and green for compliant and non-compliant. This is just a view. So this is a view sorted by site. So if when the client wanted to be able to say, I need to check site A and I need to see all people who are either active or expired. Sometimes you don't want to have to search through all the contractors. You just want by specific sites. So we would have multiple sites. Oh, actually, sorry. There's the one with the red. So that's the non-compliant contractors there, and there'll always be a comment in there to say why they're not compliant. So there can be a load of different reasons as to why, but that immediately tells the client the reasons why that contractor is not allowed to go on site.
Right.
So it gives them the information they need. You don't need to dig into anything. You can click on the flow to get more information if you want it, but that right there is everything they need. Just to say either yes or no.
This is the view at the gate, right? Do we let this
person
onto the site to work, or don't we?
Exactly.
Let's make that determination quickly. Excellent. Excellent. So, Robbie, anything you would add before we go to questions from the group? Again, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I think it really is when I hear experiences like yours, I get hopeful that we actually can tackle this challenge of process automation, which is quite substantial.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about this because the FlowForma has made my life a lot easier because having these processes in place is incredibly important. From my point of view in IT, it's just from an audit point of view, just knowing that if I need this information, it's there readily available. So it's definitely helped me a lot, and certainly it's helped the business a lot anyway.
Yeah. So I assume you just keep going. You just more and more processes.
I spend a lot of my time building sites these days. It's definitely taken over as one of my main roles.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Great. Why don't we go to Neve? Why don't we take some questions from our friends on the webinar?
Perfect. Thanks, John and Robbie. So you've been listening to John Reimer from Forrester and Robbie Malloy from Aon. Thank you both. We do have some time left for questions. So if you have any questions for John or Robbie, you can pop them into the questions facility on the right-hand side. We do have a few that have already come in, quite a few actually. So the first one's for you, Robbie. So one of our listeners is wondering, Robbie, what your advice is to organizations who are looking to automate processes, and can you share a few words of wisdom for them?
Sure, yeah. I suppose the main issue that we found is we often get people that will say, look, we want to automate a process, and they don't really have more information as to what they want to get done. So actually getting face to face and sitting down and having a good talk over exactly what the process is, documenting all the steps that they currently do to see if any of it can be cut out through the automation process. Finding out the relevant people that need to be in the loop with regards to if you've got a couple of different steps in the process. So it's very much just finding out exactly what they want, and then that will always evolve. You'll create up a mock site for them, and then they'll go, oh no, actually we forgot about this, or we have to add this. But just sitting down and talking face to face with the clients has, like we had that last week where I met a client and they had been asking some stuff, but over emails, and it just the face-to-face meeting was far more productive, and it allowed us to exactly understand where they were coming from, and then to make the changes that they requested.
Robbie, do you find, you mentioned that you've got a teammate who didn't have a development background. Does that person have a business background? Do you find it's helpful to have folks working on these projects that actually have a business background, and they can reason about requirements?
Absolutely. Like I because I don't come from an insurer background. There's certain things that I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. So I'm pretty much as I'm coming from an IT background, having someone who knows how FlowForma works and also understands the business is a huge help. You know, that they can basically explain the things that I need to know, because, you know, like various different insurer processes that I couldn't tell you anything about them if I was asked, but because they'd have a business background, they can explain how it should work, and then I can, you know, I can work to actually make that happen.
That I raise this because that's another one of the concerns here, that some people would say, oh, you don't want to have business people engaged in these projects because they will invariably produce software that's garbage, or it's impossible to maintain, or et cetera. But in my experience, the tooling, the products have advanced to the point where business people can actually, I think you've seen this, business people can actually deliver software, as crazy as that sounds.
Absolutely. Like, you know, I'd almost say it's sometimes it's more important to have the business do it themselves, you know, actually be building this, because, you know, as I was saying, we often have with certain systems that, you know, we'll get stuff pushed out to us that clearly doesn't have the end user, like, you know, it's applications that get pushed or software that gets upgraded, and the actual people on the floor will be like, this doesn't make my job any easier. So if a business person is looking at this and is either developing it themselves or helping me to develop it, they're the ones, like, we should, when we design these flows, the idea is to make life easier for everybody, to give us the information that we need. And if we're just dictating what's going to be in it without consulting the business, it's not going to work. Right.
Great. Neve, do we have another question?
Yes, John, I might direct this question to you, if that's okay. So someone here is asking, who is best placed in my organization to own our digital transformation agenda and focus on those positive customer outcomes?
Who is best placed? Well, I always find, and this harkens a bit to Robbie's comment just now, that the people who really own the operational processes. They know the data, they know the processes, they know the outcomes that they're looking for. If those folks lead, maybe they build the applications themselves, maybe they get help. But if those people lead, you're going to get automation that really matters. That really makes a difference. I've seen that. I've been looking at this space for 4 or 5 years. I've seen that consistently. And the other fact is that whenever I see whenever I encounter a group that has operations in its name, like sales ops or field ops or what have you, those groups also tend to be they're last on the priority list for central IT to get their applications done. They're always begging for automation. So they've got the knowledge, give them the right platform, give them the right support. I think they can, and I think, Robbie, you've been describing this. I think they can actually deliver the software that really is going to make a difference.
Thanks, John. That's great advice. One for you here, Robbie. So someone is saying, thanks a million for the insights. You've obviously automated lots of processes, but they're wondering, you know, how did Aon go about prioritizing those processes for automation?
So with the processes that we have, there was a few ideas in mind. Certainly the onboarding, offboarding was one of the first ones that we looked at, because keeping track of new hires and leavers was extremely important, as I said earlier, especially from an audit point of view. You know, we needed to have a system in place that just ensured that we were able to give the auditors the information that they needed. We also then, you know, obviously one of the early ideas with this was to have the contractor sites as well, the insurance vetting system, because we would have a lot of clients who need this information regularly. So, you know, we just wanted to have the system in place to provide us with that information. So at the moment, it's kind of, you know, I've got a lot of requests for various sites. So it's I wouldn't say that there's no particular none that are particularly more important at the moment. Like it really is a case-by-case basis. Sometimes we'll get a request for an urgent request for a site. Sometimes it just has to get added to the list. So yeah, at the moment, yeah, certainly we'd kind of just, as the requests come in, we just prioritize them depending on the business unit themselves. A lot of times, the business units are quite relaxed about getting these. They'll they'll say, look, there's no rush with this. If you can have a mock up in a couple of weeks, then we can review it. So it's yeah, I suppose it's a case by case basis. We just kind of prioritize it as they come in.
Okay, thanks, Robbie. John, I might give you the next one. So this is an interesting one. So someone's asking here, how important is it to engage customers and suppliers in our processes, and should my organization be doing this right now?
Yes. If you look at the companies that really do this well, that really are highly automated, have customer experiences that customers actually love. You think of the Netflixes of the world. They engage with customers routinely in testing new features and in new aspects of the customer experience. This is in my experience, this is a very different way of operating for enterprise, for folks in enterprises working with software. They typically were much more inwardly focused, didn't look out to their customers and partners. But to Robbie's point earlier, if you've got the right people in the room who are the people who are actually going to use the software that you're putting out, you're much more likely to produce a piece of software that those folks will actually use. And if that includes your customers, your end customers, so be it. If that includes your business to business, your business partners in a B2B kind of relationship, so be it. I view it as pay me now or pay me later. Either you get that feedback while it can still influence the software you produce, or you get it after the fact when it's much more difficult to deal with breakdowns and disappointments.
Thanks, John. So another question has come in for you, Robbie, and they're wondering, did you need training to automate these processes, you and your team in FlowForma?
No, not really. No proper. I had a few with the first flow that we built was the onboarding offboarding form, and we built that. There had been a kind of a little bit of work done on it before I took over, but it's so easy to use that you really don't need a huge, particularly any training. I did do a course with FlowForma after we had built that first site, just to familiarize myself with some of the more advanced features. There is quite a lot in there that you wouldn't necessarily need for all flows. So that definitely helped me when we were building some of the more advanced sites. But the easier sites the easier flows that we created, no, you can do that without any formal training, because it's very easy to use.
That's great. Another question here, John, and I think you may have touched on this earlier, but someone's just asking, they're saying they're an enterprise-sized organization and is low-code, no-code solutions for them. So you might just touch on that again, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. So the question is, if we're a large enterprise, is low-code appropriate for us? We build substantial applications, complex applications that serve thousands, if not millions. That's the idea, do you think?
I think, yeah. So I think they're asking, is no code for them as an enterprise organization? Is it okay to have those operational people to empower them to deploy their own processes?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes. So couple of comments on that. We've been, like I said, we've been doing research in this area for 4 or 5 years, and have seen various have during that time seen various surveys, some of which we do, some of which are private. Low code is a really big deal in large enterprises, and we've had some recent findings from a survey that indicate that not only are these products being adopted by large enterprises, but they're being used for very, very challenging applications, for large scale. Robbie mentioned applications that are subject to compliance, applications that have very strict availability requirements. So no downtime, no data loss. So yes, we are finding the uptake in large enterprises to be quite strong, and I believe we're seeing more and more use cases, including the very challenging use cases going to low-code platforms. Actually, you know, Robbie works for Aon. Aon is a huge company. You know, but you think about the adoption that he's describing. He started with these very critical processes. But Robbie, you're going to go on from there to do all kinds of things, aren't you? I mean, there's really you haven't described any limits here that you see in what you can do.
Yeah, you know, there isn't. You know, as far as I'm concerned, we'll just keep putting any of the processes that we have that are still not on FlowForma. I'm quite happy to get them up there. You know, it gives us that central platform, and then, you know, the clients that we have been are very happy with the sites we built for them, and there's more clients coming on every day. So, you know, onwards and upwards. Keep going.
Yeah.
Great. Another question for you, Robbie, and I think you touched on it a little earlier, but people are asking, you know, how has FlowForma process automation kind of like enhanced and given you more options than SharePoint would have before?
Yeah, the SharePoint environment that we have, you know, it works fine for your basic sort of document management stuff. You know, your just informational pages. There is a workflow process in there, but I've never found it particularly good. So the customization that we get with FlowForma is far better than anything that we'd had previously. It allowed us to actually build the flows that we needed to do the job, or it allowed us to build the flows that we wanted to do the jobs that we needed on site. It gave us that platform to actually, you know, help the business to get to do their jobs. It made their jobs easier, which in turn made my job easier, which is always good. So yeah, it's just, as I said earlier, like, you know, the more that we can do that makes our customers and our clients' jobs easier, the better it is for everybody.
Super. Just another question here for you, Robbie. There's lots for you. Someone here is asking, you know, have you integrated FlowForma with any of the other apps that you use in Aon?
There'd be various different flows that would do different tasks, you know, from the as I said, the onboarding, the contractors and stuff like that. When you say apps,
maybe like CRM.
There wouldn't be any integration of that as of right now. Certainly, it may be something we look at in the future, but I'm not too sure at the moment.
Okay, thanks for answering that one. We're coming close now to the end of the Q&A. Maybe just one last question, Robbie. So someone's asking, you know, what's your next steps in Aon? What are the next processes you're going to tackle with FlowForma?
There's a couple more contractor sites coming up, so that's I've got to build one of those on Monday for a demo with the client. That's going to be on Wednesday or Thursday. There's some upgrades to an existing contractor or client site that we have. We met as I was saying, we met the client last week, and that was a good meeting. You know, it allowed them to get across exactly what it is they'd like added to the site. You know, it's working well at the moment, but they just want to add in a bit more functionality that we hadn't put in the original sites. I've an internal transfer site which I have to build for our HR department, which is for anyone moving between the business units in our company. So we have a few different business units in Ireland who would have different applications, different access. So we need a process for tracking that. We also have an error reporting site, or an error and like a complaints kind of site, just for if anyone notices any issues around the site, whether it be health and safety. It allows them to log that issue on the error reporting site. And then finally, I'm creating an outage site, an outage flow. So this is just for IT, for us personally. If we want to keep track of any infrastructure or application outages, it just gives us, you know, that'll allow us to have a good idea of, say, troublesome applications or issues that we have. It gives us a good way of keeping track of those issues, and then we can then present those to our, you know, the management on our side to say, look, we need, say, if it's extra infrastructure to stop this from happening, or extra resources to help, to stop some of the application issues. It's just a very good way of keeping track of those issues. So that they'd be the main sites that flows that I'd be looking to build in the next couple of weeks.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Robbie. They're keeping you very busy.
Yeah. Neve, I just wanted to add one thing on the question about integration, with CRM and other applications. Robbie's not gone there yet, but many have. These are very, very common use cases for low code, is to build applications that interact with or draw data from a variety of enterprise apps and present it in new ways, or overlay those those core applications with new processes. That's very, very common in this market.
Great, thanks for that, John. Unfortunately, we're soon reaching the end of our hour together, so we can't answer all the questions that have been put into the chat facility. If your question wasn't answered, we'll contact you after the webinar and answer your question directly. So thanks very much to everyone for attending. I have some recommended next steps. So you can visit our website and you can sign up for a 30-day trial there quite easily. You could book a live demo to see FlowForma in action. And we'd be happy for you to ask for one of our experts to call you back. In the handouts, there's a few relevant pieces of collateral. You can also download our latest ebook there, which is 6 ways to automate your processes and accelerate digital transformation. And that's an ebook compiling some great customer stories, just like Robbie's one that he shared today. So lastly, I'd like to let you know that at the end of this webinar, a short survey will pop up. If you could take 2 minutes to fill it out, we would really appreciate that. So thanks everyone for attending today. And thank you, John and Robbie, for speaking with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks very much.